You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Well, good morning.
Hey there.
Oh. Windows 10 Creator update, huh? For those tuning in, we're watching a video on Windows. Microsoft had a big unveil this week. What are you doing, Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Well, you know, I just released to the Google Play Store, Graveyard Politics.
Oh, a new app that you wrote, I take it.
I did, and it's not available for tablets. So if you're not into VR, you can still enjoy it. So I'm sorry, I was a little consumed here. I guess I'll put it down. We have a show to run, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So what are we watching?
Wow, this is the intro video from Microsoft. They had an announcement. They had a bunch of devices. In fact, super cool, slick. Sadly, I can't afford it. That their new, oh my gosh, the ghoul just attacked me. Sorry. But obviously a lot of cool things, but probably the most important thing, and we got a black screen now, is
Surface Studio?
Well, they have the Surface Studio, thank you. And the Surface Studio is this nice, really cool thing. And, you know, I was going to wait till a little bit later, so that we'll get back to that. But that was a little intro video. They also have Windows Creator, which is their new software that's supposed to be available in July of 2017. But if you're on the fast track of installs, not only can you get that, supposedly it's going to be released today, so it wasn't last night, so I can't show it. But also there is 3D Paint, which we talked about last week. I was hoping that my system that I'm using now was on the fast track, but I'm glad it probably isn't. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be watching today. But I do have it on a laptop. You know, I could run upstairs when you're talking later on to get it. But I'll try and find a little video that gives a bit of little bit of promo. But I did try it out last night. It's kind of cool. Essentially, they've mixed 3D or Paint with some new features for 3D. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And you can bring in little 3D avatars like people and so forth that are built into it. But as I'll tell you a little bit later, there is a 3D repository, you know, kind of like Thingiverse, but Microsoft called Remix that will show off a little bit as well. And also the other cool thing is you can bring in your own items, your own OBJs or STLs, and paint them literally within the Paint application, which I thought was cool. Sadly, I don't know why. Supposedly it associates a texture with it, but for some reason I couldn't get it to work last night, but it was really late. So really a lot of good things. If I can find a little video later on, we'll show it. So the other thing, which is the theme of our show today, is VRSpookery. You know, Halloween's coming up, and as I just mentioned, I have my own little app out there in the Google Play Store right now for Cardboard, the new Daydream VR viewer. So if you have a Pixel phone, you can grab it right now, and also for tablets. And a little bit later, I'll show you a little sneak peek of the iOS version, hopefully to go up today, so that it'll be available for Halloween as well. So if you've got an iPhone, you can try it out too. Now, I do recommend the 6S Plus or the new 7 Plus because of the larger screen. And you can see my new Silver Edition, which is specifically made for the iPhone 6S and the 6 Plus or 7. And more importantly, it attaches with the structure sensor. So if you wanted to walk around in your VR world, as we've done before. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And, you know, Chris, you've got some cool items too to talk about, right?
Well, yeah, I bit the bullet. I got an Ultimaker 3 on the way.
What? You know, we had John on last week, which is the president of Ultimaker USA. And, yeah, we had a nice chat. And I'm thinking, man, I wish Chris was here. But
yeah, real excited. That gives us the dual material. You know, I do a lot of the nylons. I print a lot of nylons. The customers that I have really like the strength of nylon, but some geometries are really hard to achieve because, you know, support removal on nylon, because of layer to layer bonding, it can be kind of a chore. So having that soluble support like the Fortis has, but being able to tap into nylons and some of the other materials and be able to print any geometry, that's going to be that's going to make add a lot of add a lot of value to what I do.
Well, plus, the Ultimaker kind of reminds me of the Matrix, the White Room. I don't know.
Yeah, so I've got a place cleared off. It'll be here hopefully Monday or Tuesday of next week, and then hopefully by Friday I'll have an update for how that thing's humming along. Maybe a little
Super
review.
Cool. So, who did you order it from, if you don't mind me asking? Because we went through a lot of.
From a place in Chicago because I wanted to order it. One of my favorite companies that I order a lot of material through is down in Southern California, Matter Hackers, who I went on and I had it in my cart. I was going to order it. But sales tax, they wanted $400 in sales tax. So
because of California?
Yeah. So I went out of state and bought it out of state and had it shipped.
Now, remember, you're supposed to claim that still on your taxes.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so let's get into the spookeries. This is a list I found from finder.com, Australia, of all places. And let's see what they picked out. So here's some items. As you know, the PlayStation VR has been getting some accolades for providing a low-cost VR. But we also have Gear VR. And I have some, as you know, I'm disgruntled with Oculus as far as shutting off my Note 7. Oh, yes, I still have my Note 7. Hey, and it hasn't burnt up. You know, it's funny. There are still like 1 million units out there, and there hasn't been any more reports of these things exploding. And so I wonder what's up with that. Plus, I did debunk that 2 or 3 of those were either staged or not even Note 7s. So I really wonder if what the real issue is. Plus, there are some iPhone 7s that have been reported to be combusting as well. So here we go. So if you got a Gear VR cardboard, you can go with the Insidious Chapter 3, which is basically, as I call it, passive VR. It's a spherical video. And so it's a little scary. If you're familiar with Sisters, who isn't? It's kind of
what is this?
Well, it's available basically on everything. This is the one that has garnered probably the most downloads for a VR app. It's not very realistic in the sense that it uses some low graphics and resolutions, but basically it'll run on everything. But it is creepy, and as you can see, here's one of the sisters, and essentially you're sitting on a couch and things go spooky around you.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Well, it'll scare you, so
okay,
be prepared.
Good.
Keep the lights on.
I like it. No, lights off.
And then 1157 is pretty spooky too. I've tried that. Again, I would keep the lights off. It's dark, so ambient light seems to affect it. Also, make sure, and this basically applies to any VR experience, if you're using a mobile phone, make sure that you turn down your screen. I found that with my own Graveyard Politics, now in the Google Play Store. The making sure your screen. So I might want to create an opening screen that says test your screen. So it's, like they have in other games that show you a grayscale gradation to make sure that you have your screen properly adjusted, because it kind of ruins the effect if your brightness is too high and you don't really get that creepiness. And this is one of those examples. Also very creepy. A chair in a room. I haven't played that one, so you'd have to go out and look at that. Goosebumps, I have seen that. That is a little frightening. Have not done Dead Secret. I have looked at Dread Halls. They have a free demo, but essentially it's kind of like what do you want to call it? Not necessarily an action game, an adventure type game that you walk through. This has been around for a little bit. It's on sale right now in the Gear VR store. And then what you have for the PSVR kitchen demo, that I have not played yet. And then this one seems to be getting a lot of interest. Here They Lie. which is like a mystery, spooky thing that I think we showed a little bit of a video before, and I'll go ahead and do it again so that you can get an idea. But again, you have to have a Sony PlayStation VR for it.
Oh, Santa Monica Studio too.
Yeah. But I think we showed this before, but it's a little creepy.
Whoa. I've been playing through this game called Edge of Nowhere for the Oculus.
I've heard of it.
That is creepy and scary too. It's cool because you get the sense that something's like right up on your neck, you know, and right about to, and like yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say when you die, it happens fast and it's loud. So I love what they're doing now with the, like Dolby even has like this whole spherical surround sound thing. So like if something's behind you, it sounds like it's behind you, which has been around on games for a little while, but it's even more immersive with the VR because then it's tying the sight and the sound together, you know? Whoa.
So if you remember, we did show this off, and you pretty much had the same reaction when we showed it off the last time. So yes, very surreal, interesting scenes. Kind of, if you remember Jacob's Ladder, this is what this reminds me of, and probably where they're trying to go with it, but obviously very spooky. But as you were making the point, we've actually had a couple of guests on. So if you go back to some previous episode about audio engineers creating, as they call it, 3D audio, and how that actually is different than what you're seeing in games. And the big difference is the audio, not only can you adjust the volume from left ear to right ear, but you can also adjust the delay period. So if you combine these as well as shifting the acoustical audio spectrum, you can simulate what it would sound like going behind you. So it gives you a full three-dimensional sound sphere. And not only, as you mentioned, there's the Dolby Atmos version. There's also the Oculus version that can also be done in Gear VR. There is the Google 3D sound plugins as well that you can use if you're making Google Cardboard or the new Daydream. And then there's a couple of other private companies that also have some plugins. And yes, as you indicated, it is to give you a full three-dimensional surround experience. And I didn't actually use that in my app currently, and I may plug it in later. One of the things is I have a larger world than normally is available in mobile. So I'm already dealing with a low frame rate, but a lot of stuff going on with it. So in the future, I may work with maybe a smaller version of it. But yes, if you have not, as you said, you've already experienced in some of them. So let's kind of go through there. We have Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, again, another PSVR. And then what's the famous Silent Hills? Supposedly Silent Hill will also be available for the PlayStation VR. Now, from earlier experiences with that particular Silent Hill demo that they had at GDC, it did make people sick, so they may have gone back to revisit how they handle the VR portion of it. But as you said, being immersed, and not only with these active games, but also in, as I call it, passive VR videos. There's a few out there that you can get in Cardboard and so forth that basically you're in a video, but also very creepy. And there's a couple of out there, but to me, it's one thing to be scared by something that's in front of you. It's another to be scared when you're inside of it and objects come up to you very quickly, or just the dreariness of sounds that just kind of float around you and you don't really have a good bearing on it. In my side, creates a creep. So I think we're going to see more of this, and obviously this is the season for it. So if you haven't tried VR, you might want to move into it. All right, Chris, why don't you go on with our first news item?
Awesome. Well, this one, we're into the news now. This is GE snaps up this German 3D printing firm. This is according to Fortune.com. This is from yesterday. For $599 million, U.S. conglomerate General Electric has agreed to buy privately held German 3D printing firm Concept Laser for 549 million euros. It said Thursday, after its bid for rival SLM Solutions failed. GE and its competitors have begun to invest seriously in 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing, which produces parts with less work than traditional production methods, generates less scrap material, and expands design possibilities. The U.S. group is initially buying 75% of Lichtenfels-based Concept Laser, which specializes in metal additive manufacturing, with the agreement following to take full ownership in a number of years. So they're getting in. Looks like GE stepped up to the plate for $600 million to get into the laser metal sintering market. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's an understatement. So when you say laser sintering, are we talking standard nylon or powder, or we're also talking metal?
This is apparently metal sintering. So SLM is selective laser metal sintering.
So
yeah.
And you did mention that. So
yeah,
it wasn't quite
so that's what this company researches, and they also are maybe positioning themselves to look at some other companies.
Well, that is the next big thing, and obviously there is still a cost to it, but there are services that do provide metal. In fact, Shapeways offers it. I don't know the tensile strength of it, but as we've talked about some time now, in fact, that was one of our opening items in our own presentations about Elon Musk using that to develop some components for his rocket using metals, actually titanium metal sintering, if I remember correctly. So. And there was another article that I read as well that there are some advantages, maybe even you mentioned it, there's some advantages of using additive manufacturing. In fact, you did mention versus standard injection molding, because you can do some unique things with additive manufacturing that you can't necessarily do with injection. And also it simplifies a design process as well. So. Okay, so let's move on to my item. And as mentioned, the big news this week was Microsoft. So, a lot of people think that Apple Macintoshes are the only thing that you can use if you're creative. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm not a creative person, but I have been in the Windows camp for decades now. And in the 3D realm, really, it's the only tool out there that supports all the Autodesk applications. I don't know if there's a Mac version of SolidWorks, but from a 3D perspective, Windows really was the only platform if you really wanted to get involved in it. And for a long time, most of the gaming engines were just Windows oriented. Now, what's unique is that Unity did start on Mac, but is now available in Windows. So I am not surprised that Microsoft has been stretching its arms in its own creative product, and they've come out with something that, if you remember, and people have already referred to it, remember the original iMac, which looked like a lamp that you could swivel around the top of it? So a lot of people compared it. So what you have here, if you can see it behind me, and you can actually pre-order it today, is the new Surface Studio. And we kind of talked about that a little bit. Now, I saw some demos of it, and there's plenty of videos out there, but for $3,000, so it's a little on the steep side, and that's only a Core i5. And if you know, I bought several all-in-ones from Dell, or was it HP, one of the two, that I had in my office for rent, that were nowhere near this. I think they were like $1,000. In fact, you bought one of them. In fact, I don't even know. Maybe that's what you're using right now to be on this podcast. No?
No, I have it downstairs. It's running machines.
So there are all-in-ones have been around. Now, what makes this one unique, other than it's basically a large tablet, so you have the ability to draw on it, and then they have this little Surface Studio Puck that can be used not only on this device but on your your regular surface. But essentially, because it swivels like that, you can put it down to almost the desk size, and using their pen, and I do have a pen similar to this, and because they're using the Wacom or Wacom tablet, actually I don't think so in this particular device, they've gone away from that, but it still has touch sensitivity, either I think it's like 1024, maybe in 2040 levels, but you can use it like a big paintbrush. And this particular version is an i5, but you can buy it in different things. Obviously, the base contains the computer. Some people complain it has limited jacks on the back, but it still has a bunch of USB 3s. I think there's like 4 of them. Has dual port as well as HDMI, so you can run a separate monitor with it. It looks like there's also an SD card slot, which some people are complaining because there was another announcement. Apple put out a new MacBook Pro that they took away these SD cards. So here we go. Here's your text for specs for it: 4500 by 3000. Not quite an iMac. What do they call it? Their high res, their 4K, which is actually a 5K model, but very close to that. And then obviously it has the 10-point multi-touch, and then you can either get it with an i7. So pretty cool in my book. Sadly, I don't think I can afford a $3,000 computer.
What's the 2 terabyte i7 run?
4,000. So it's pretty steep. And you know what's funny is that we also had some announcements last week of the Google Pixel, and people are complaining, what happened to the Nexus low-cost pricing? It appears that these companies finally think, you know, hey, we can charge the same prices at Apple. We create quality products. Let's do it. So obviously everybody is gauging themselves based upon Apple, but the Surface Book, which was another device that was also released. Let's see if I can have it here. If you remember when that came out, that wowed it, and they actually did it around the same time, either I think right before the Apple event as well, and kind of one-upped them. But the Surface Book, if you remember, is both a keyboard and a monitor with a hinge system, and you know, it had some hiccups. The first version had some power issues. They ironed that all out, but again, this new i7 version is also kind of steep. And it's funny, Apple has compared it on their own website, or somebody did, what this costs versus getting a MacBook Pro. But keep in mind, a MacBook Pro does not have a touch-sensitive screen. You don't have a little, what do you call it, pin capability with it. So if you need that capability, and frankly, if you need a, you know, a Windows type computer, this is a good game to work with, and people are enjoying it. So there you go. So you've got 2 different items, and if I remember correctly, that little puck we saw before will work with it as well. And then here you can see them using a little box to run multiple monitors with it. So what makes it different? It's using the more powerful i7. It says it will get at least, I don't know, 10, 20 hours. I don't remember exactly, but we'll see once it's out there. And again, obviously, they will compare themselves to a MacBook as well. So there are 2 products out there, the Apple MacBook as well as this, and then that all-in-one unit. But if that's not it, later on we'll talk about the software end of it. And you have an item that Microsoft unleashed the possibility of a low-cost VR headset to use with Windows 10. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So on to your next item, Chris.
All right. This is called Clicks and Brisk BBC News. Friend sent this to me this week. This is amazing. So obviously architects are out there. They build everything. A lot of the architects are using that Autodesk product called Revit. And so what these guys have done, these are VR into it. So what they're doing is they've developed a product called Revzit, or is that what it's called? Let me make sure that I'm getting that name right. Revisto. And it's basically what it does is it's San Francisco-based Visera has introduced a gamification and VR capability to its BIM product, Revisto. So now what they do is that you can take your BIM product, whatever you drew on BIM product, which is how, modern skyscrapers, I mean, you have to, there's no way that you could do traditional anymore for the complexities that are in for the IT infrastructure and all of the things that go into building skyscrapers and cities and all that. So what this allows you to do is they've built in basically a game engine product, so you can put on a VR headset and you can actually walk around in your building. It's kind of cool. It's says that they can save its clients up to 40% of billable time because of errors, inadequate lighting, or awkward placing of support columns, for example. So they can actually like put the lights in and see how the building's lit and walk around and, see how it's all going.
What's the application that this
it's
this
called Ravi Stowe.
Yeah. Can you also expand your screen a little bit too?
Yeah.
Ravi
So
Stowe. Now, is it a standalone
Ravi
product
Stowe.
or does it work with Revit?
So I assumed that it was a Revit like bridge, but I think it's its own standalone product. So I guess we'll have to do a little research on that. And
well, as you know, I worked for a design firm and still keep in touch with some of the architects there, and they're big into
it converts Revit files.
Okay. Well, that's extremely important because Revit seems to be the go-to product for BIM and 4D architecture, and to be able to do what you're indicating. And one of the things that I was impressed with, especially with Autodesk, is that you can bring in, what do you want to call it, physics accurate lighting. So when you bring in a light, it will produce the lighting that you would actually see in that particular environment. So what you're telling me is this application in VR would also provide that same light accuracy. So if you bring in one of these models, and they're all modeled based upon lights that you would actually use, so this would give you an accurate assessment. Pretty cool.
It works. It says right on their website here, and let me pull it up, is that Ravi Stowe integrates with Revit, Navisworks, AutoCAD, Civil 3D, SketchUp, and ArchiCAD. So, and then it also has a bunch of file formats that you can bring right in.
Is there a price?
Let's see, buy a yearly subscription or it's anywhere from 5,000 for a yearly subscription is anywhere from 5,000 a year to 15,000 a year.
It all depends on the number of collaborators that are involved with it.
Right. So if you had 20 collaborators, you'd have 5,000 a year. So,
well, I mean,
for some of these big firms, that's probably nothing.
Or even a small architectural firm who, because I'm assuming by collaborating, you could put this out there and multiple people can be viewing the same VR and making in maybe some type of Skype type channel or audio, you could have real-time communications and feedback. Well, I'll have to look into that. That sounds super neat. I'll send that over to my architect friend and see what he comes up with. All right, so
cool. Here's
another application. Now, obviously, we're back into the Microsoft, and this one, frankly, is not as sophisticated, but I'm going to let Microsoft give their own little demo here. But we had I've been trying to show off 3D Paint for some time, and I do have it actually working on my tablet as well. And I didn't bring it down because I thought I would be able to use it on my station here, my streaming station, but sadly, that did not work. So, but the cool thing is, as we talked about before, you can add 3D objects, and you can literally use like vector drawing, and then it extrudes it. But then you can paint it, which I thought was kind of cool. And as you can see there, they're placing objects. And something that I don't know if I mentioned already in the show, but I played with it last night. I was able to import my own OBJs, my own STLs, and then I could paint them. Now notice they're using surfaces to do this. And it is, frankly, that fluid. I mean, I have an older, I think it's 3 years old now, laptop. It's this Asus. It is an i7, but I found that it's fairly fluid. Obviously, it's going to depend on how sophisticated or complex your models are, and I did bring in some with a lot of polygons, but it seemed to support them pretty well. Now, one thing that I just maybe haven't figured out, supposedly you can bring an OBJ in and it will bring in the textures along with it. And as you can see there, there's a demo of bringing in a model and then 3D printing it. So how do you get it? Well, let me drop into it. The way that you get it is you go out and make sure that you have the Windows 10 anniversary update. And so the way to make sure that you get the Windows 10 anniversary update is make sure you're getting the preview builds. But the anniversary build should already be available on most people's Windows 10. And I do know that my workstation here is on the anniversary, yet it still wouldn't load, but maybe everybody in the world is trying to download it. So it tells you how to get into the Insider, and then you have the slow ring and fast ring. And then I'll tell you why you might want to go to the fast ring if this isn't the Windows machine that you're dependent upon. Because if you go to the fast ring, supposedly this week they're going to be releasing Microsoft Windows Creator. And not only will you be able to get the paint, but there'll be other 3D support features, including the new support for their own VR desktop to be used in those low-cost VR headsets that Chris will talk about in a little bit. So if you're interested in doing it, I recommend if you go with the release preview, that will get you to anniversary. If you go with slow, you'll get the latest updates, but more than likely won't brick your machine or cause major problems. But if you're one of those guys who like to be in the fast lane or have a machine that you don't care what happens to it, I highly recommend going with the fast ring and allowing it to download installs. But keep in mind, some of these install builds don't always work right and could break something. So that is my warning there. So that's how you go ahead about and do, I can't even talk, how you go about getting this Paint 3D. And then let's see if I have some further, I'll get to that in a moment. But then you have to go out to the Microsoft Store. And so if you don't know where that is, I called it the flag, but your Windows symbol down in your bottom left-hand corner, open that up, look for the Windows Store, bring that up, type in 3D Paint or 3D, and then Paint will come up and install it. And it's about that easy. And then you can go to town with it. The other thing that I thought was cool, and I saw this, is that they're bringing something called Windows 10 Remix, which is kind of like the Thingiverse for this 3D Paint program. And it's a place to bring in models. And you can join today, so you can sign up, and then you can actually bring in models, export models so other people can enjoy them. So it's kind of like their own little store, not necessarily store, their little repository area for your 3D creations and so forth that you can share with other people. So I thought that's kind of neat. So they're basically going all into this. So do you want to stay on the Microsoft thing, or you want to jump to something else and come back to it in our VR section?
No, we could bring up the headset for sure if you want.
Well, let's jump into that then. So what is this? I mean, I heard about it. $300 VR headsets?
Yeah. So they're apparently partnering with like Asus. Microsoft kind of unveiled yesterday in their announcement, along with all these other products that they can't, like that Surface and the and the Paint. They gave a keynote. It was long. I mean, it was like, I don't remember how many hours it was, but it was like a big part of the day, it seemed like. This $299 VR headset, it's partnered with HP, Dell, Lenovo, and those 5 manufacturers, big name manufacturers, they're apparently like kind of saying, here's what we're going to do. Here's some of the equipment that's going to go, but you do whatever you want as far as making the outside and kind of manufacturing it. So that's all I really know about it. And then they're apparently building the headsets around the HoloLens framework. And so that was in the keynote. And so they're saying that this is going to, yeah, go ahead.
So that is correct, Chris. In fact, if you remember, when Intel gave their keynote, they actually had a version of this that they're putting out using their RealSense sensor that will also do the same thing. Excuse me. And yes, it is tied to the HoloLens environment, even though it's not a HoloLens, which means you can create a virtual desktop if that's the choice of words. But more importantly, it's a full API so that you can develop within Windows VR experiences. I don't know if Unity will have a plugin for it. I haven't seen any news on that. So we'll have to see if some of the major gaming engines will utilize this. But the other thing that's very important with this, it uses what they call inside-out positional tracking. And as I said, it's 6 degrees of freedom. So essentially, as I've been showing off in the last year with the structure sensor, this will also be provided in this $300 headset. Now keep in mind, you do have to tie it to a Windows machine, and we'll have a little section later on in my Splunking in the Tech Cave of, hey, I want to do Windows-oriented VR, but I don't want to be tied to my desktop, so what is out there? But essentially, if you want to use this inside-out feature where you can walk around in your VR environment, you'll have to have some type of mobile device. If you remember, Intel had something similar to their NUC built into their headset. I thought it was kind of hideous and bulky. These that you showed here aren't that appealing either, so hopefully they'll be a little bit massaged as far as their appearance. I do like the fact is, like my own design with my Neoti VR headband, it is something that rests on your head with the actual headset in front of your face. I think that's a much more comfortable design than having, a ski goggle on. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But the important thing is, this is $300. So it's like $300 less than others. I don't know if that $300 indicates a less quality product. So we'll have to see on that. But again, remember, this does have positional tracking built into it at that price, and it will work hand in hand with Windows 10. So I'm going to jump right to this new item here that I saw just today. T-Mobile just leaked a Windows 10 VR phone. And when you thought Windows 10 was dead, so the Alcatel, which is not known for stupendous smartphones, they have released this and consider it the Windows designed virtual reality phone. I guess there is a version of Windows 10 that will support VR headsets, and because of the full Windows 10 Creative. So here you go. I don't know any more than that. I just thought this was kind of funny, and it's coming soon. But here's that little video where they're announcing.
Well, and I have some banter about this. I think some companies are really smart, like Microsoft, super smart. You have to imagine there's many thousands of people working at Microsoft, but up at the top, Microsoft are definitely market leaders in a lot of ways, and a smart move a lot of times, especially in a market like this that's moving so fast and there's so much being done, is to kind of just position yourself in the background for a little while, wait and see what's going on, wait for kind of like the people that are pouring a lot of investment and a lot of time to see what they come up with, and then kind of take the best of all of the products out there and kind of put them together. And so I think a lot of times it's smart to just wait. Sometimes it makes sense to be first to market, because that, you know, you earn a huge market share going to being first to market amongst the early adopters. But see, we're still way in the early adopter phase with the whole VR thing. I mean, you may know somebody that has a VR headset. You might have a headset, but your mom and dad don't have a headset, and everybody you know doesn't have a headset. They will that's why I think the mobile market's going to be huge, and this whole phone and having like just a headset you can pop your phone in, because you've already got a screen and the accelerometers you need. But now it's just about putting in more pixels and then computational power, like a dedicated GPU to run high-end games. That would be really where I see some development. But I think Microsoft kind of played this one smart. They kind of sat in the wings for a little bit and waited to see what was going to happen with Valve and Oculus.
Well, actually, I think they've had either a 5-year or 10-year plan in this area. Obviously, they showed the HoloLens off, it's almost 2 years now. A lot of buzz last year and even before that. And they finally came out with it earlier this year. $3,000. It wasn't cheap, but it allowed them to do this. If it weren't for sending or creating that groundwork, which is obviously 3D and the positional tracking functionality they have in it, I don't think we would have seen this. So I think they've had this in the works for some time. I think they just released it at a time when this is a big buzz, and I think it's going to be at a price point. They found this out with the PlayStation VR, that this is what people are interested in. A lot of people have Windows machines, and one of the things that was really mentioned and pointed out is you don't need a super fast machine. So does that mean that the quality of the VR experience won't be that well? Who knows? But the whole point is they have promised that you don't need a super duper machine to run their particular version of VR, which will be very interesting how they go about doing that. So it'll be, yeah, I think it's, in my opinion, as we know, a very cool time, and that's probably why we're covering it. Hey, I want to show this little video. I don't know if you were a Hunger Games type fan, and I actually haven't watched it.
Sure.
And I've pushed the quality up, but this just came out as well.
What? Can you watch this on Oculus?
It's on
YouTube.
It's also 3D. So if you got your anaglyph glasses, I've got mine. And I'm going to drop the quality down a little bit so that it. What do you think, huh?
Yeah.
Now again, if you have YouTube functionality in Oculus, you'll be able to watch it. If you have obviously YouTube, if you have Cardboard.
What?
And I'm moving my mouse right now. That's not the tracking. Now, I have to admit, I was a little bit of a closet fan. I've watched all the different saga. Siobhan, my wife, my little character here, was not a big fan, so I had to kind of watch those in the closet. But I did watch the last version inside my my NeoDVR Uplay. I've been watching several 3D type movies that way, and you know, it's actually not a bad experience. So if you've never tried a 3D movie in your Oculus, you might want to try it. Now, of course, you're going to have to find a version of it that's either done in top-bottom, which means putting the stereo or side-to-side, and there are different versions out there, and there are merits for both. YouTube VR or 360 support stereo is top-bottom.
That's pretty cool, Mike.
Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah. Well,
So, I mean, we're just going to see more and more content, and these devices are going to get obviously even more immersive. The power is increasing, and you know, it's kind of surprising that Apple hasn't jumped into it yet. But a little bit later in the Spelunking of the Tech Cave, I will show a sneak peek at my version of Graveyard Politics for the iOS. And frankly, of all the VR devices out there, I have not tried it on the Pixel yet. I'm using a 6S Plus, which is last year's. It runs the smoothest, and I have a Snapdragon 820, two phones. So I don't know what has kept Apple. Maybe they know that there are other people working on it, but the iPhone is kind of like that hidden closet VR device or mobile VR device that if you exploit it properly can give you probably the best experience. But that's just my opinion. All right, Chris, next item for you.
Okay, Microsoft again. This was another item from there. And Mike, you previewed it kind of in the beginning, but they also invented a new way to bring your photos to life. This is similar to what I would say is 123D Catch from Autodesk. But what's unique about it is instead of having to upload your photos to the cloud and have it process, it's actually processing live on the fly to capture 3D objects using your phone, using this Windows phone, and it's called the Windows Capture 3D Experience. So you can walk around an object and scan it in real time.
Now it shows that looks like a phablet or a tablet, so I'm assuming that you could probably utilize this with a Surface or some other type of device too. And so that there is the Connect
amazing.
2.
Yeah, and I think what they might be hinting at is, or some people are speculating, is that maybe there's some sort of Connect built into this phone. I don't know. It seems unlikely that just the photos would be able to stitch this together. It looks like there's some sort of LiDAR data coming in, LiDAR or structured light coming back in. If you watch the video very carefully as it's piecing it together, you see all those, like the grid that's very much like what you see with structured light sensing.
Well, that might just be the mesh information. So is this a specific new phone, or is this available for any Windows phone?
They showed it on their new phone at the event.
Okay. So here's my take on it. As I mentioned, the headsets are also going to be able to do positional tracking, which again, you need to map out the 3 dimensions of your area in order to track or create positional tracking. I do know that there are several companies working on what they call Parallax Imaging, which essentially taking this stereo image, you can create depth information. And this can be done with a single camera as well if you position it. And this is what they do, if you remember, with photogrammetry, because if you know the distance between images, then you can determine the depth information based upon the parallax of those multiple images. They might be applying that technique here. And again, that is going to be extremely important if they can do it with that, what do you want to call it, speed, for all kinds of things. Obviously in the mobile phone area, and if you put 2 cameras in there instead of just 1, who knows, maybe that camera has 2, then you can do that on the fly. And I think that's going to be something extremely interesting, and they are not the only ones doing it. And we'll see other products out there. But again, Windows likes to bring things out and talk about them very quickly. I like that. It keeps people excited. You know, even if it's a letdown when it finally comes to the market, it keeps us excited. I mean, Google has been doing that. I think Apple needs to start taking a page from that instead of being so secretive, you know, because all it does is, you know, everybody's saying, well, what about Apple? And I don't know if you saw the latest comment or post. The news item is that Apple's iPhones seem to be, I won't use the word plummet because I'm not going to use some clickbait here, but they have decreased. So one of the reasons is I don't think there's anything really exciting happening from iPhones as you're seeing in some of these others, and we need to start spicing things up. Okay, so do you want to cover your Print Whisperer first, and then I'll cover the Spelunking?
Sure, sure, sure. So today I want to talk about another health tip because last week I wanted to throw this in there, and I've got a tip for next week, but I'm going to save it till next week. But
so if I can interject, I did put it in the show notes last week, so it is out there. So people read them. So,
but I want to bring it up in the show. This is another health tip because I know a couple weeks ago I talked about the standing desk. I've been reading this book called Desk Bound. Great book, and it's about getting to your feet. Working on your feet all day is a lot better for you than sitting in a chair. Sitting in a chair for prolonged hours can be shown to be worse for you than smoking. This is another little tip, and I call it earth yourself. And because we're computer tech junkies, we're in this technology world, we're surrounded by this environment of free electrons all the time. And we're basically like these big antennas, and we're soaking them all in. And if we're standing on insulated floors, we're not properly dissipating, those free electrons, and it can actually build up in your body and cause health problems. Cardiovascular disease. There's some studies that are going on right now. There's been studies in the past about links from EMF to cancer. So, and we're just finding out now kind of the health implications. You can find out more about those health implications by going to Mercola.com. And Dr. Mercola, he just wrote a great book called Effortless Healing. I read that. It's a fantastic book, all about kind of getting you on track to fighting most of the common diseases that most people die of. But EMF, it causes a lot of problems. And so there's actually a way that you can measure how much voltage your body's hanging on to. Like if you're surrounded by computer monitors and a lot of electronic equipment, I was standing in my office, I took a voltage meter. There's a little test you can look up on YouTube how to do it safely. You can take a standard voltmeter and plug one into your wall socket, and you can take a reading on yourself to see how much ambient voltage you have. I was reading about 5 volts. Okay, so I had 5 volts of buildup in me. So for about $60 on Amazon, you can buy this thing called an earthing mat. And what it does is it's basically a mat that lays on your floor, and you go barefoot on it. So, and then you have a little wire that goes in between your ground or earth, that third prong on an American wall socket. You plug that in, and I dropped down to 0.2. So it bleeds off most of the electricity that's building up in you. It can escape then and go to ground, and you can actually. There's studies showing there's one of the main studies is this one that Dr. Sinatra has done and shown the ties to high blood pressure and lowering your blood pressure with this technique using grounding. So if you suffer from high blood pressure, earthing actually might clear it up without medication. And actually they say after you do some earthing to consult with your doctor, because you may actually have to reduce the amount of blood pressure medication you're on because it's so effective. So my little tip is go check out these earthing mats. I can bring up the link here to Amazon. This is the earthing mat here. And obviously, they don't last forever. You have to replace the mat after about 6 months to a year. Because especially if you are in a high wear and tear environment using it every day. So you have to check it regularly. So this is the whole set for $60 here. And it comes with the little thing that plugs into your wall. You can also do it with a wristband. So you're properly grounded. But Mike had to remind me as if you're working with electronics, open electronics that are sensitive, you want to make sure not to be grounded. You want to be insulated.
Well, that I guess is my segue. So yes, I did make a point about in kind of an editor's note that, I've worked in electronics for, almost 4 decades now. And I was a technical instructor in the military. And one of the things we did every Friday was safety. And I wrote a lot of them. And we worked with a lot of high voltage. but we also worked around electrostatic devices, and this reminded me of the mats that we had. Now keep in mind, electrostatic mats, including probably this one, aren't tied directly to ground. However, what they do provide is about 20,000 ohms between you and ground, so it does leak it off. And I have a feeling that if you took a meter to your mat there, you would find that it's probably somewhere around that as well, because it's only, from what I saw in the description on Amazon, silver impregnated. It is not a full metal sheet. So I have a feeling it's not completely grounded, but my concern is you indicated, being in bare feet. Now again, if you have open electronics, please do not use bare feet. Another safety tip from that perspective, do not use both hands when you're working in something with high voltage that is open. And the reason for that is you do not want to create a conductive path between your arms, which, gosh, there's a heart between them, which could literally stop you. And if you're working by yourself, like both Chris and I are, somebody might not be able to come back and save you. And one of the things that we did on an annual basis was take CPR. We learned how to use the stake, which if you're going to be working around electronics that are open, literally it has a hook on the end, and it's to grab or basically pull you off the current, because you do not want to touch somebody who is being affected by high voltage, because then you become part of that circuit. The other concern I have is, if you do it right, yes, I would have to agree with you, plugging a meter into an AC circuit is okay, but do not have it in the current setting. The way meters work, you actually go through it and you actually can form your part of that circuit. Not a good thing to do. Whereas the voltage meter actually works in parallel with it. Now, I'm always open to long-term studies, and we do not know how much these EMFs affect us, but we're surrounded by them. What you're actually measuring with that test is the current flowing from your AC circuits. It does not take into account all the other EMF that affects us, like radio waves, your cell phone. And there are some people that have become extremely paranoid from it. There are a lot of concrete studies that say there isn't. As you know, there's been ties to cell phones and brain tumors and cancer. So, I think personally it's all up in the air. We need to do some, we have to start spending some money to see some long-term effects. And unlike other things that have come out in the news, we need to make sure that it is vetted through independent studies where we don't have the hands of the big industry making or changing the positions like they did with tobacco, as well as fats in our diets. If you remember, that just came out that the fat industry, or I can't remember who, influenced those studies, and we don't need that. So we need some independent studies where people's hands aren't in it, and I'm not trying to be paranoid here, but at the same time, I do feel that some studies don't do proper scientific investigator, I can't even talk, studies and so forth, but that's just my opinion. But again, please be safe out there. If you're tinkerers like Chris and I, and you're working around voltage, normally 5 volts is not that bad. You could probably put that in your tongue, might zap you a little bit. Remember when you put a 9-volt battery? I did. And hear that, but 110 volts is nothing to sneeze at. It if you're in Europe or other countries that are using 220. As I was telling Chris at the beginning of the show, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, young and stupid. 2 wires were hanging out of a room. I don't know what possessed me, but I grabbed them and I felt like the hand of God had come down behind me. In fact, I looked around because I thought somebody had grabbed me and literally threw me to the other side of the room. Why that happened? That's the cool thing about alternating current, is because it shifts cycles. It not only can attract you or keep you locked into it, but it can also expel you from it. And that's literally what happened to me. The other day, I was in Spain. And
what a video that would have been.
Oh, that was, yeah. I think at that time there wasn't really any video cameras per se. So if you see open wires, don't do it. If you've got children, especially make sure that things aren't open, because kids are curious, even older kids. Be safe with all that stuff. In fact, when I went to Spain for TEDx the other day, I had a power supply that went bad, and I don't know what happened, but I got zapped again. But again, I was using my own safety techniques. It was only one hand. So yes, if you're clumsy or you're not thinking, you're tired, that's the most important time to think about these things. So my little safety tip as well. And the other cool thing about these earth mats is if they are like leaking, in other words, they're not full grounds, you're electrostatically, because I think there was a strap, a wrist strap for that too. So you've got your electrostatic mat. So if you're into using the Raspberry Pi or tinkering with sensors and so forth, hey, no problem with that. All right, Chris, sorry for adding to that, but we lost a viewer with my little rant, so oh well. So let me get into my little Tech Cave items, if you don't mind, and I'll try to run through them real quick. So let's say you want to explore with your Oculus, because you know you can buy another sensor now and do full room VR. So let's say you go in that direction, you have your hand controllers, but there's some interesting videos that have shown the fact is if you have this umbilical cord, you can get wrapped in it, you know, it might get around your neck, you might be hanging yourself from, I don't know. But imagine being able to put it on your back. So there's a couple of ways of going about doing this. Zotac is one of these companies that is providing these backpacks, but maybe if you've got a little bit of your own ingenuity, you can get something like this. And these just came out, and you can actually buy them now. They're the Magnus 1080s and the 1060s, which are specifically made with the GTX 1060s and 1070s. And in fact, in this case, these upper ones here are 1080s, which means they're expensive, but if you notice, they're somewhat bulky. But these 1060s and the 1070s are very compact. They're very lightweight, but they're full computers. I don't think they're mobile components in these. They do require about 180 watt power supplies, so you're going to need some pretty big battery packs in order to run them, but you can buy them and you can create your own backpack. Now, these are a little pricey. They're about $1,000 in a bare bone kit, which means you have to supply a hard drive with them and memory with these. So it's your choice if you want to go ahead and buy these. But yeah, I thought this was kind of cool, and I might be picking one up. However, there are other options as well. And I have geez, did I lose my article? So here's another Newegg. If you wanted to buy it, they're $999. Again, this is a complete i5 6400, just like in that Microsoft product for $3,000, but it includes the GTX 1060 graphics, which seems to be the not the bare minimum, but a minimum. It's actually twice the performance of what the bare minimum was in the previous NVIDIA graphics card for the Oculus or the HTC Vive. So now you can get it in a very small package. I was thinking if you open up some of these pictures of literally taking the bottom off and mounting a plate on it so that I could make like a backpack type thing that you just swing on and then plug everything in very quickly, making it open so that you have proper air ventilation, which I think would be a concern with some of these backpacks out there. Pretty easy to work with. But there are other options. Razer, you've heard of Razer Blade. They've got some new machines out there. And so you might want to look into that. I find them a little pricey. They have this new stealth version for $879, but it only has Intel graphics. You have to use this other unit right next to it here, plugged in through its Thunderbolt type port. It's like, I think it might be a Thunderbolt or a USB 3.1 to allow it to use an external graphics card. That's not something you're going to probably strap on your back. They do have a new laptop out there. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah, this right here, the new Razer Blade, but I found that it is like $1,500 if I remember correctly. Maybe even close to 2,000. Yeah, 1849. So it's obviously not super cheap. And I wanted to show there's some alternatives from Asus, the ROG, the Republic of Gaming. They've got a brand new one, and I think this is the one I'm going to get. 1350 includes an i7, a M2 SSD, as well as a 1 terabyte hard drive, and 16 gigs of memory. 1350. And, you know, I think you got an Asus laptop. I've had an Asus laptop, been very happy with it. So I think it's time to upgrade to a new one that'll be full supportive. I wanted to look at, MSI has one that's like a 14-inch. It's very compact, but they still want $1,500 for it, and I'm just partial to Asus. It'll be a little bit big, but again, I'm going to plan to build a little carrier for it and put it on my back and be able to do portable either Windows, VR, or maybe Oculus or HTC. I haven't decided yet on which one I'm going to finally move forward with. But that's my tips as far as gaming. And then I'm going to show you a little demo of another little product I've been working on. No, we don't want that. Great. I guess I don't want to show off my password. But you remember I was talking about the, come on. That's what happens when you try to run demos. Okay, here we go. So here is the iOS version. Stayed up very late again, but here you go. Do you hear some sound with it? So I don't know if you can see the response time. There might be some lag because I'm running this through an Apple TV, but I found that the response time with even the iPhone 6s Plus is really responsive with this new version. And I can just imagine, and I'm going to be waiting till November to actually pick up my iPhone 7, that it'll be even twice this. So as I've said before, you know, Apple iPhones can actually make a very good mobile VR platform if somebody would actually create an API to use it. I don't know what Apple's been waiting for. They seem to always be behind in the game, but who knows? Maybe this is in the works. Supposedly there's some AR going on. But even with Cardboard, I find the responsiveness with this, which is really, I wouldn't say struggles, but it requires a high-performance smartphone to run. I still have to build the gamepad into it. But yeah, I'm actually pretty pleased with the response. And this is using the Metal API. And yeah, kind of fun. But if you're into Android, one more item, and then I will go away. As mentioned at the beginning of the show, it is now available in the Google Play Store. There are 3 versions. There's the Graveyard Politics Daydream Edition. So if you've got a new Pixel or you're planning to get the Daydream VR device, this will work with it. It is, the quality is a little bit better, but it should support the Snapdragon 821 at least 30 frames per second at the bare minimum. It can go up to 60, but one of the reasons the frame rate is lower is because there's a lot going on in it. And frankly, you don't have to move very fast, so it's not really action-oriented, and it's kind of something you can just sit back and just relax and enjoy the moonlight and listen to the bats flutter. But remember, there is Gary the Ghoul, the Ghost, and the Drum Troll to watch out for. So keep those in mind. And there is a version for Cardboard as well, as you can see over here, as well as tablets. So they're free, no money involved. So if you've got an Android device, Snapdragon 805 or higher, a tablet like maybe the, is what I had here, which is the Shield tablet, works fine on it. All right, so there's my little promo. So I think that's about it. What do we have in the 3D printing news? We are almost in November, and it looks like we covered this already. There'll be something in Russia. So if you need an excuse to go to Russia in the winter, which probably I don't suggest, you can go to the 3D Print Expo there. I still have not found a VR calendar. There is a event sponsored by GDC in November that I might be going to, but it's mainly for developers, called VR GDC or something like that. I'll make sure I post it next week. So on that note, I'm done with my items. Chris,
Awesome.
anything else to
Well,
add?
thank you to all of our wonderful news contributors, like, obviously Microsoft, Ultimaker, Remix 3D, BBC, 3dprint.com, Business Insider, The Verge, and others. If we forgot you, we will show them in the show notes, and we will see you next week on another episode of All Things 3D.
I hope we can start on time. Bye.
Bye.